My fiancé and I postponed our wedding because his mother fell extremely ill, and so we're waiting until she's healthy enough to attend. My 17-year-old niece procrastinated in finding a dress for prom next Saturday, so she called me and asked if she could borrow one of my gowns. I work in the fashion industry and have amassed a small collection of black tie gowns that are reserved for events. I was happy to lend one out to my niece. They came over today, but I was on the phone with the client, so I just told them to go upstairs and go find something they liked. My cat knocked into a bag of flowers, so I was busy cleaning that up when my niece and my sister walked out of my closet. I didn't want them to step into the mess, so I told them I'd catch them on my niece's prom night. I went to see what dress my niece took, and I noticed that the white bag that contained my wedding dress wasn't zipped all the way, and I noticed my dress was missing. I called my sister, but she was avoiding my phone calls and immediately drove her to her house to confront her. They initially denied, saying they didn't know that it was my wedding dress, but that was BS because my sister was there when I picked out the dress and was at all my fittings. Then they changed the story and said that was the only dress my niece liked, and didn't think it was a big deal since it didn't really look like a wedding dress, and they would have returned it anyways. I simply took my dress and left, and my niece was furious and crying, saying I ruined her prom. My boyfriend and I have been on and off for about 4 years. We've had our share of problems that stem mostly from his parents. He comes from a very upper-class family, and we met when I was just waitressing and he was in college for a high-paying job. 6 months ago, I gave birth to a very much unplanned but beautiful baby girl. Of course, his parents were pissed about this, and from the start of my pregnancy kept trying to say that they didn't think it was my boyfriend's baby. But when our daughter was born, they became amazing grandparents. They always offered to keep her tons when we needed breaks, and it really helped us out, and they would always buy things for her, returning her with new outfits, bottles, toys, and etc. So anyways, a few days ago, my boyfriend came home and he was in a pretty bad mood. He didn't want to tell me, but in the end, he decided it was best if I knew. His parents let it slip that they had taken our daughter to get a DNA test about a month after she was born. Of course, the results came back that my boyfriend was the father, but he was pissed that they would even do something like this without our consent. I was livid. I called his parents and immediately told them that they were cut off. I don't need them or their money, and I'm disgusted that they would stoop so low. They apologized and said they only wanted what was best for their son, and they can't blame me for trying to be good parents. When I was 27, my boyfriend proposed to me. We both have stable jobs and decided to plan the wedding immediately. Around the same time, my brother proposed to his 24-year-old girlfriend, and they started planning for the wedding as well. One day, my future sister-in-law called me to see if we can go over wedding planning. That's when she told me if I could get married in the afternoon and that she could get married an hour or two later, and then we share the reception. She said it'd become a great way for us to become sisters, and that this will mean the world to my brother. In reality, I know that they aren't financially well off, and she wants the fancy wedding without the fancy wedding price tag. I didn't really know what to say, but I told her that's mine and my fiancé's wedding. We planned it for us, and we want it to be about us. She exploded in anger and said I wouldn't understand how hurtful it is to see the amazing wedding that I'm planning and know that she couldn't have something like that. I told her I waited to get married so that I could afford the wedding I wanted, and she said she wants to get married before she's old and dried up like some people. She called me heartless and a selfish bitch. I stormed off, and my brother called me a few days later. He asked if I could please reconsider. When my parents decided to get a divorce, I chose to stay with my dad. He was more financially stable, and he also promised to take care of me in the future and help me go through college as long as I graduated. When my grandmother from my mother's side passed away, I received a $30,000 inheritance, and recently my grandfather from my father's side passed away and left me with $50,000 as well. I was also working part-time jobs, and with all of that, I was able to save enough to comfortably put me through my 4 years of school. One day, my mom surprised my stepsister and bought her a brand new car. I was kind of shocked because it was way out of their budget because I knew they were struggling financially. When I looked at my bank account, I saw that a majority of my money was missing. I have my mom on all of my accounts because she wanted to monitor to make sure I don't spend too much money. I never would have thought she would have taken this and paid for my stepsister's car. Her reasoning was that my stepsister had a brighter future and had a bigger possibility of going to an Ivy League school and providing for us in the future. While I, a student who gets mostly B's and C's, would just take over the family business, so I didn't really need it, and I could always work in the future. Growing up as the youngest of 6 siblings, I knew at a really young age I would have to put myself through college. So by the time I was 19, I saved enough money to put me through college with the help of scholarships and have plenty left over. Well, my eldest sister got married a month ago, and my parents took out a second mortgage, $30,000 to help pay for her wedding. My dad lost his job right after, and I knew that they were struggling financially. So when my mom texted me a few weeks ago saying, "Call me as soon as you can," I knew what she was asking for. I didn't have a problem lending them a few thousand and help them pay their bills, and I'd also give them a few of my tutoring gigs to help make some extra cash. But what I didn't expect was my parents' demand that I gave them the near $40,000 I saved to put myself through college. When I disagreed, my mom said, "You made that money under our roof. We were the ones who allowed you to work, so you have it because of us anyway. We bought you food and clothes for 18 years. I said that's the bare minimum when you sign up to become parents. And she hung up on me saying I wouldn't have the life I have today if it wasn't for them. I feel awful for refusing to help them out, but on the other hand, this was their fault. After moving to a new city, I met this guy on Tinder. Our relationship was progressing really fast, and after a few weeks of dating, I found out I was pregnant. We went to the hospital where they confirmed I was pregnant, but very early on. My boyfriend was furious. He said he didn't sign up for this and he knew people who could quote-unquote get rid of it. I told him I'm going through with this with or without him. I didn't speak to him for a couple days when he reached out saying he wants to be part of his child's life. He moved in immediately so that we could start saving money. The morning after he moved in, he made breakfast for me. I was extremely nauseous and not in the mood to eat anything. He started yelling at me and saying it's for the baby, I can't be selfish. Less than 24 hours later, I was bleeding uncontrollably. He told me it was nothing and I shouldn't seek help. When the bleeding didn't stop, I went to the hospital where they told me I was no longer pregnant. I had no suspicion he had anything to do with it, so we stayed together. Weeks later, I finally kicked him out because of the abuse he was giving me and my dogs. I found out I was pregnant and I told my OB the situation, and that's when she told me I most likely didn't miscarry but was given something to dispel my pregnancy. My daughter is now 2, but still live in fear of seeing him in public.
Part 2 of how a fortune teller saved my life. Months went by since I saw the fortune teller. I never gave what she said a second thought. One morning I woke up and went to go check the mail. There was a package on my doorstep, but I hadn't ordered anything recently. There was a bad storm that day, and the package was soaked. After taking it inside, I noticed that the package wasn't mine and it had been delivered to the wrong address. This is when it clicked in my head, and I remembered what the crazy old fortune teller lady had told me. I'll receive something that isn't mine, it'll be wet, stay at a friend's house that night. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little freaked out. I thought to myself it was probably a coincidence and that packages get delivered to the wrong address all the time. But what she said stayed in the back of my mind all day. I decided to stay at my sister's house that night just to be safe. I went over to her house in the storm and we had a much needed girls' night. The next morning I went home and I was shocked. Sometime last night during the storm, the large tree in my front yard had fallen on my house right on top of my bedroom. It completely broke through the roof, destroying my room and the hall. I got back in my car and drove to the fortune teller's business to thank her. When I got there, her business had been closed down and she was nowhere to be found. To this day, I still believe that her warning saved my life.
I work as an assistant for a really big fashion company. I had a defective wedding dress and my boss asked if I knew anyone we could give it to. My best friend recently got engaged, so it was perfect. When she posted on Instagram to thank me and my boss, my family caught wind of it, and that's when the influx of calls came. I do not have a good relationship with my family. My parents kicked me out when I was 16 after I came out to them, and my sister wasn't much better. They demanded to know why I gave the dress to my friend and not to my sister. I didn't even know she was engaged. They suggested I try to take it back from my friend, as family should always come first. My sister even tried to call my boss to complain. I just got off the phone with my mom, and this is how the conversation went. She says my sister is very upset about the dress, and I told her she needs to get over it. My mom says I can make it up to them by giving her another dress. I posted one last night on my Instagram. It's a $12,000 dress, and that's the one my sister wants. And I told her, you expect me to give you a $12,000 dress when you kicked me out when I was 16? My mom says, that was a long time ago, and we're talking about your sister, not me. When I refused to give the dress, my mom says the least I can do is help her buy one. At this point, I hang up, and I've been avoiding them since then. My mother-in-law is super passive-aggressive, rude, and disorganized. Leading up to my wedding, she always criticized me about my weight. After our wedding, she was kind enough to offer to store some of our wedding stuff. A year later, my mother-in-law announces that she's going to do a big vow renewal celebration. Thought it was a bit ridiculous for a 65-year-old woman on her third marriage, but hey, it's her money. As the ceremony starts, the bridesmaids come down, and then enters the bride, wearing my dress. At this point, I'm raging. My husband and I confront her after the ceremony, where she denies and says I'm delusional for thinking it's my dress. I tell my husband we're leaving, but she starts crying and begging us to stay, swearing it's not the same gown. The next day, we go to her house to get the wedding stuff she stored. She gives us everything besides the dress, saying she lost it. After lots of screaming on my end and threats, she finally gets my dress. Lo and behold, it's the same dress she wore last night, except for the alteration of the corset and complete with her sweat and food stain from the night before. She starts sobbing and saying she thought it would look better on her because she's been working out so much and how she couldn't afford a new dress. I can now never wear my dress because she altered it to her size.